You've probably seen the discourse, influencers going back to 9 to 5, and everyone's calling it a sign of recession.
The reality of being a content creator with over 200,000 followers is I'm broke.
There's so many reasons why having like a traditional job is beneficial. Obviously, the biggest thing is like security. I have over 1 million followers and I quit being a full-time influencer. I got a 9 to 5 and I'm significantly happier now.
Is that actually true? And if it is, how and why? We've been noticing a lot of influencers lately either picking a 9 to 5 on top of content creation or dropping content creation altogether. This wasn't something that totally surprised anyone, but the patterns a lot of these influencers are sharing when they actually explain themselves, those are genuinely interesting, and they don't all point at the same direction. On the surface, influencers have always been synonymous with money, doing well, promoting overconsumption, living a fancy life, traveling, and driving nice cars. But lately, that image has been cracking a little. We're seeing people who can't afford rent and can't make their mortgage, living paycheck to paycheck, taking any brand deal because their livelihood depends on it. That's genuinely strange whiplash to watch happen in real time. The same industry that used to be shorthand of made it is now producing people who are one bad month away from trouble. So is this actually a recession hitting influencers, or is it something else going on? That's what we're going to uncover today. Now, not every creator is in the same boat. Some are doing better than ever.
Over the last 3 days, I had my closet professionally organized, and it literally looks like a museum.
And that split is actually part of what got people asking whether this is a recession in the first place. So before we get into the bigger economic picture, let's actually look at why individual creators say they're doing this in their own words. And yeah, that's the same creator you caught a glimpse of a second ago. We'll get to her story shortly. Let's start with the version that is actually about money, because it's real, and I don't want to pretend it isn't. Meet Austin Hankwitz, a finance creator worth knowing because he says the quiet part out loud.
Oh my gosh, rent is due or my mortgage is coming up. They get a little desperate and they might take a brand deal with a company they might not align with, and that's not very authentic. And so it's just a terrible spiral there.
That's the mechanic a lot of people miss when they talk about this. When your rent depends on the next brand deal landing, you stop being able to say no to deals you don't actually believe in. It's not always laziness or about greed. It's dependency, plain and simple. Imagine having to choose between paying your bills and standing behind something you'd normally never put your name on. That's not a hypothetical question for a lot of creators. That's a normal day. And it's not just that the money became unreliable for some creators. When it did come in, it came in all at once. A lot of people genuinely aren't equipped to handle that. Think about how normal lifestyle creep is for anyone. You get a raise, a promotion, and slowly your spending just catches up. A nicer apartment, eating out more, and before you know it, you're back to living paycheck to paycheck, just at a higher scale.
Why is Tara selling her house? Because the mortgage was so high. And the next question is actually, how much is your mortgage? It was $25,000 a month. And I used to be making enough money to cover that. I am no longer. And I'm very transparent about that.
The reality of being a content creator with over 200,000 followers is I'm broke. I go viral literally every single week.
Now, take that same very human pattern and speed it up by 10. Because instead of gradual raise, it's a lump sum, landing all at once with zero structure around it. No HR benefits package, no automatic 401k, nobody walking you through what to actually do with it. And I'm not saying you always need someone to walk you through it, but having no financial literacy with a lot of money can lead to catastrophic things. It's the same mistake a lot of us make after a promotion, just under a magnifying glass, happening faster at higher stakes, with a lot less of safety net underneath it. But for a lot of creators, it's genuinely not about the money at all.
I have over 1 million followers and I quit being a full-time influencer. I got a 9 to 5 and I'm significantly happier now. And here's all the reasons why. There's this perception online that full freedom and flexibility equates to happiness, but I don't think that's true. I think that happiness actually comes from overcoming challenges that you feel passionate about. But not just that, actually overcoming things as a team. Humans are social creatures and we need community and partnership that's not just online. While some people may like the flexibility and schedule, feeling like my days are structured actually makes them feel more gratifying. If you depend on views for your income, I think it's easy for your morals to get fuzzy. I see a lot of influencers influencers creating content that becomes increasingly sensationalist because they've entered this zero-sum rat race for views. No longer depending solely on influencing for income, I feel like I have the freedom to create more of the content, not only that I believe in, but feels more creatively fulfilling.
And I think that's the part people skip past too quickly because I got bored doesn't align as well as I went broke.
This has nothing to do with money. Financially, I am doing the best that I've ever done.
You honestly might start hating content creation if you quit your 9-to-5 job and start doing it full time.
We can definitely see a trend emerging there. These creators just aren't finding fulfillment anymore, money or not. And look, someone could argue that's not the full picture, and there's always more going on behind a 2-minute video than what gets said out loud. Maybe.
Was actually doing content creation full time. If TikTok fails, like, first of all, you could be logged out at any point. This is so unstable, and I am somebody who likes stability.
But honestly, even if it's not the complete story, I think it's generally understandable. And this is actually something I relate to personally. I've worked from home for 6 years now. And it's not always easy. It gets lonely. You miss going to the office, changing out of pajamas, having lunch with coworkers, having something outside of your own head to talk about at the end of the day. Being your own boss sounds amazing from the outside. But it can mean your entire life starts revolving around just you. Same day, repeating, no novelty, nobody to bounce an idea off of before you post it. And that lack of novelty doesn't just affect the person, it affects the content too. If you're not living a life that inspires you, you're probably not making inspired content either. And that's not a coincidence. That's simply cause and effect. Let's take the example of the creator Hubby's life.
Everybody meet Hub's life. He has been documenting his journey as a corporate America person for the last 2 years, doing day-in-the-life vlogs of him getting ready, going to work, working out, and all the things that he does in a day. He's garnered quite a following on TikTok with almost 1 million followers, but as it happens when you become popular on the internet, he started getting brand deals, partnerships, making money from the Creator Fund, and actually ended up quitting his job recently to do TikTok and Instagram and social media full time. Now that he's not working as a corporate America worker, his followers are pissed because they appreciated his content before of being just like everyone else. And they're saying he's out of touch, he's losing his relatability, and people are not happy that he left.
His audience loved his content because he was so relatable. His audience didn't sign up for someone living an extraordinary life. They signed up for someone living their life. The same commute, the same lunch break, the same small talk with coworkers, and his laptop sliding into his backpack at the start of every video. That was so satisfying to watch. And that's genuinely what people related to. The second he stopped being that person, the thing that made his content work in the first place stopped working. Almost ironic. Succeeding at content creation broke the exact thing his content was about. Another thing that people disregard when they talk about this, and it's a life stage piece. Maybe you took a few years off from traditional path, your version of a sabbatical. But not everyone wants to be a full-time creator for a decade straight. People change. Priorities change. Some of us start caring about things like retirement, some sort of structure to build a life around, which is basically the opposite of the FIRE movement fantasy everyone assumes creators are chasing. Nobody talks about wanting to go back to structure like it's a valid goal, but for a lot of people, it generally is. And there's one more layer that ties this whole chapter together. When your livelihood depends entirely on content, you're more likely to say yes to things you don't actually believe in. That's the same spiral Hankwitz was talking about earlier. This goes a little bit deeper than that.
Oh my gosh, rent is due or my mortgage is coming up. They get a little desperate and they might take a brand deal with a company they might not align with, and that's not very authentic. And so it's just a terrible spiral there.
But when it's not your only income, when you have the freedom to say no, you get to be selective. You only take the brands you actually align with.
If you depend on views for your income, I think it's easy for your morals to get fuzzy. I see a lot of influencers creating content that becomes increasingly sensationalist because they've entered this zero-sum rat race for views. No longer depending solely on influencing for income, I feel like I have the freedom to create more of the content, not only that I believe in, but feels more creatively fulfilling.
And ironically, that selectivity makes your content better because your audience can tell the difference from someone who believes what they're saying and someone who's just trying to cash a check. So money is real. For a lot of creators, it's the whole story. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But for a lot of others, it's boredom. this connection, or just needing something outside of themselves to look forward to every day. Something a ring light and a content calendar can't actually give you. But if it's really about fulfillment and structure for so many people, why does the word recession keep coming up in every single one of these conversations? This part actually does trace back to real numbers, just not the ones you'd expect. If we're being honest, part of why this discourse is so satisfying to watch comes down to something pretty human. Nobody really loves watching someone flex a lifestyle they can't relate to. And there is a quiet vindication in watching the same lifestyle wobble a little. It's not that people want to see anyone struggle. It's more that we've been fed, look how good my life is content for years. And a crack in that image feels like the curtain is finally slipping. Part of why the recession narrative feels so satisfying is that it lets us treat one out-of-touch influencer spending as proof the whole industry is collapsing.
Over the last 3 days, I had my closet professionally organized, and it literally looks like a museum.
It's just that it's very unevenly split. And once you actually look at the numbers, the shape of it gets a lot clearer. So the money isn't leaving the industry, it's growing, and growing at a very considerable pace. Not just holding steady, but it's not lending the same for everyone. The top 10% of creators are now capturing 62% of all brand ad spend, up from 53% 2 years ago. The pie is getting bigger. The slices are still uneven though. That's not a small shift. It's basically 10% points moving upward in 2 years. And when the pie gets carved up like that, it's not really a mystery who ends up on the losing end. Take someone like this.
Do y'all remember the OG YouTuber Nicole Guerrero? She was a beauty guru, over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. All her videos did numbers. Like, she had collabs with, the high-end makeup brands that would sell out. Everybody loved this makeup guru, right? I started to turn a little side eye at her because she's a beauty guru and she did a collaboration with the army. I didn't even know that armies collaborated with influencers.
That's not really an economy story. It's pretty much an adaptation story. The days of just posting your outfit or your lunch and calling it a day are over. And creators who build their whole identity around that era are the ones feeling it the hardest right now.
I feel like we keep bringing up 2016 and it's Can we get real? I was a loser, so I talked to a camera.
You were making money in 2016.
Can we drop a monthly number?
Making from views alone.
Me and Gabby didn't have an actual YouTube sponsorship till 2019.
What? What were you doing?
So much money off just ads.
The barrier to entry used to be almost nothing. Anyone with a smartphone could actually be an influencer if they wanted to. Now it takes actual strategy, actual business understanding to make it as a creator. And a lot of people who came up in the easy years genuinely haven't adapted to that because for a long time they didn't have to.
Last year, 48% of creators made $15,000 or less. Only 13% made over 100K.
That's a rough spread of an industry people assume is a guaranteed payday. Most creators aren't quietly rich. They're closer to this
I'm broke
than to mention tour.
Today, we are doing the ultimate dream house tour.
I remember reading this last year in the Forbes top creators list. Vivian, too, known as your rich BFF. We made $3.2 million last year. Granted, this is the exception, not the rule.
And niche matters enormously. Some categories are thriving while others are getting completely gutted. And it's not just about what you post either. It's who brands are choosing to keep. They're not spreading budgets across dozens of one-off deals anymore. A lot of brands are picking fewer creators and going deeper with them, which means if you're not one of the chosen few, the door is closing a lot faster than it used to. Lumping all of that together under one word like recession,
when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand,
flattens a story that's actually a lot more interesting than that. There's also a trust problem we cannot actually ignore. It's layered underneath all of this, and you don't need survey data to tell you this. The comments say it themselves. When beauty influencer Jaclyn Hill complained last year that her views weren't what they used to be, the replies weren't sympathetic. People weren't just saying she'd lost her audience. They were telling her why. We're tired of watching influencers rub their wealth in our faces. Teach me something, educate me. That is what I want, wrote another. The audience is actively rejecting the format that used to work. In their own words on the post itself.
I think about this every day, and this is coming from like an old school beauty content creator. I started on YouTube 14 years ago. Like, that is insane. I have been here for every single era, consistently uploading, downloading every new platform, like watch the birth of TikTok, you know, like I remember when Instagram became a thing. I was already on YouTube when Instagram became a thing, and I downloaded Instagram, and like it was like this new app, and we were posting the square photos.
Brands aren't just spending less on average creators. They're actively cutting people who don't clear a much higher bar than they used to. Sometimes days before a trip, they were already promised. And this is where it starts to feel less like recession and more like something else entirely. A market maturing, not collapsing. Every industry goes through this phase eventually. The early days are loose and generous because nobody's figured out the rules yet. Then the rules show up. And this is honestly the part where my financial background is geeking out a little. Because market maturing, not collapsing, isn't a special theory about influencers. It's just what growth curves do literally in any industry once the easy years end. This isn't new, it's just particularly new to this industry. And I'm not the only one who read the discourse that way, but where I think this conversation actually needs to go is why people are leaving, not just what the chart says.
Back to delivering every single meal almost every single day to myself in my apartment. So this is all the food I deliver to myself in a day with pricing and receipts because I'd be incredibly nosy too. This is still my favorite coffee ever. I am so excited to come home to it. Real ones know I always get the exact same thing, an iced latte with almond milk, 2 pumps of vanilla because I am in fact American, vanilla cream, cold foam, and cinnamon. And this was $25.18 after 20% tip. Cheers.
And that's the tell. The reaction wasn't really about the coffee. Look at what the comments start picking apart once you actually read them. Junk fees, delivery markups, the same margin squeeze patterns showing up everywhere else in the economy right now, in places that have nothing to do with influencers at all. This is the same maturity curve every fast growth industry eventually hits. The money is not disappearing from the industry. The brands are getting just more pickier about where they invest in. It's the same thing that happens to brands, honestly. Nokia didn't disappear because phones stopped selling. It disappeared because the value in the industry moved from hardware and durability to software and ecosystem. Nokia kept building what worked 5 years earlier while everyone else moved on to what people actually wanted next. And that's such a direct parallel here. The creators struggling right now aren't struggling because content stopped mattering. They're struggling because they're still making the same version of content that mattered 5 years ago. Same logic applies to creators who are, in a very real sense, their own personal brand, whether they think of themselves that way or not. So really, these are the two overlapping reasons people are heading back to 9 to 5. Sometimes it's I need the money. And sometimes it's I need to feel relevant and relatable again. And this isn't cutting it for me anymore. And the tricky part is that when you are your own brand, it's generally hard to separate the person from the persona, which is exactly why this whole thing gets so messy and so personal for creators in a way that never really does for a regular company. So let's go back to where we started. It's tempting to look at that gap and just call it one thing: recession, or greed, or whatever headline fits the moment best. But it's actually both of these things and neither of them, depending on who you're looking at and how they built what they have. Some people are going back to 9 to 5 because the money generally ran out. Others are going back because their lives stopped being fulfilling before the money did. And the industry underneath all of it isn't collapsing. It's growing up. That growth is just landing very differently depending on where you happen to sit in. And that's a much harder story to tell in one headline than recession is. So no, I don't think this is a recession. I think it's something a lot more human than that. A lot of people figuring out in real time what they actually want their day-to-day to look like, with or without camera pointed at them. And honestly, I think that's a more useful thing to sit with than another chart. And what about you? Do you really think this is a sign of recession or it's something else? Let me know down in the comments. If you like this type of content, I make these videos all the time of breaking down things that might seem mundane, but they're not. If you like this content, subscribe.
I feel like we're in such a weird place on social media as content creators where I am like fighting. I feel like I am like trying to run through mud to connect with my followers at this point. I feel like there are so many bots, and I feel like these apps are now controlling who views my videos, and I feel like I get punished and penalized for not showing up and creating all the time. In the sense of, I took off, like I didn't post a TikTok, I think for like a week and a half, 2 weeks maybe. Like life happens, I've been doing this for 14 years, maybe I'm a little burnt out, God forbid.